I think it's really critical that we take a step back, we think about what these transitions could be in our lives and start to work with someone, start to work with a financial advisor who's empathetic, who listens, who has a planning practice.
Hello and welcome to another great edition of Beyond the Hype. Yeah, you guys know I say every episode is great, but I deliver every time, and today will be no exception. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP and Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. Welcome to the show. If you're joining by YouTube, we want you to subscribe, like, comment, share. Make sure everybody else knows about this show. Our audience has been growing tremendously over the past year in particular. We thank you for that. But of course, you can catch this show across all the social platforms and at blackenterprise.com. Today, we're coming back to one of the regular themes of Beyond the Hype that we've been doing now, I guess, going on 3 years, which is this idea about money moves that matter. We've been bringing experts from the financial services industry and just all walks of life, because when it's all said and done, it's about building wealth, not for the sake of money, that's kind of the scorecard, but for having better lives from generation to generation. We talk about the idea of multi-generational wealth. When it all boils down to it, is what we want to have for ourselves, our families, our communities, the people we care about, the things we care about, and of course, doing the things that matter, even though there's tons of things you could do. We can do all the things, but we like to focus with this series on what really matters. And today we're talking about building wealth through life's transitions. And I'm really excited. You know, we always try to get the top people in their spaces to have these conversations. And we've been able to get none other than Kathleen Pritchard, who's head of retail practice management in North America, and our friends at Manulife John Hancock Investments. Kathleen, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you could be here for this conversation.
Thank you, Alfred, and I'm honored to be here and part of this today.
So listen, Kathleen, I always like to talk about, the things that make people tick. I mean, this is something you've been doing for a very long time. I know you'll get into it. But yes, it's the way you make a living, but it's also the way you decided to make a life for yourself. And that goes to what serves you emotionally, serves you mentally, makes you feel like you're doing work that matters. Tell me about your daily work at Manulife John Hancock, and talk to your audience about your journey to doing what you do now.
Sure. On a daily basis, what I'm focused on and what my team is focused on is building educational programs to help financial professionals, financial advisors, and their clients with life transitions, with their wealth. And I've been in this business almost 40 years. Can't believe I'm actually saying that, but almost 40 years. And I did work as an advisor when I first started in the business. And I've always been really passionate about educating advisors and educating their clients. I think it's really, really critically important. And there's been a lot of stops along the way, doing a lot of different things, but I've landed in this practice management area for about the past 20, 25 years. So, and I really, really enjoy it, because knowing that you're having an impact, that you can actually help change people's lives, is very meaningful.
We talked on the pre-call, we're both baby boomers, and I'm like you.
Yes.
I'm looking up, and I've been at Black Enterprise going on 39 years, and I'm like, what happened? How did that happen? Enjoyed every minute of the ride, but that wasn't necessarily the plan. But it's really a great thing. Again, I was at this great conference this weekend, and many of these people have known me for a long time. And I talk about what it really means to do something that you do well, that you're, well rewarded for from the strict compensation standpoint. But most importantly is what you really want to do. It aligns with the values of your life. It gives you a sense of passion and mission. And that comes through in my conversations with you, that this means more to you. You can make a life, you can make a living, but it's another thing to be able to get up out of bed every day and do something that actually matters to you and matters to people. This episode focuses on navigating transitions, like caregiving, retirement, obviously entrepreneurship, which is a big part of the Black Enterprise audience, divorce, which, like I say, I've had plenty of personal experience with. But it all goes with the larger umbrella of, I tell people, life be lifing. So we make our plans, or we don't, because we think it's just going to unfold the way we want to. And then often our challenges at navigating these transitions is a reluctance to plan. And especially in the financial space, planning is so important. And the people that you're educating about how to help people to plan is so important. What are some moments in your own journey, personal or professional, that shaped how you think about this idea of financial resilience, the ability to navigate life changes that are inevitable no matter, quote unquote, how well you plan.
Well, I mean, I have to be honest with you. There's so many. I'm going to try to focus in on a few.
Mm-hmm.
The program that we built here is called Women, Wealth, and Wisdom. And while it does focus on women, the themes are applicable to everyone. And I think one of the big things that inspired me to go down this path of this education was the fact that I have been in this business a long time. I'd seen a lot of these women in investing programs over the years, and frankly, they left me underwhelmed and, sort of vaguely insulted as well. And while I didn't like what I saw in the industry, I didn't actually have an answer. I didn't have a vision for how to make it more impactful or more meaningful. And when I got to Manulife John Hancock Investments, they actually had the germination of a good idea. They had a program that had some case studies, and I thought, okay, this is an interesting idea. Now, I will be honest, they weren't well executed at the time, but it was where we started, and we were able to dig in and build these case studies and make them real, about these life transitions, the ones that you mentioned and a few others, and really dig in and provide meaningful resources around that. So that was inspiring to me as well. But I'll be honest with you, the other thing that inspired me to focus in on this women audience and this female audience was that I've been a client of financial advisors, and I've sat in front of them with my husband, and I have been amazed, and I just let it happen because I want it to play out. But I've been amazed at how they tend to look at and focus the entire conversation on my husband. And this will typically go on for a little bit. And then my husband will hold up his hand and say, let me just tell you, you're talking to the wrong person. You need to be talking to my wife. She's been in this business for years. And then they'll turn to me and they'll say, oh, Kathleen, what is it that you do? And then I'll say, well, I build programs to educate financial advisors. And you can just see their faces drop. But I've been in that chair. I've seen what happens, and it's very frustrating to me because women are a major economic force in this country today and need to be respected and need to be listened to. So that's what inspired me really to build this program. But there's been also many, as all of us have, many personal stories in our family and in our lives that have inspired me to try to provide this kind of education so that hopefully people can avoid some of the mistakes that I've made in my life.
Well, you talk about the need to be respected, the need to be listened to, which is not just with financial planning, that's with every area of life, and
Sure.
the need to actually be seen. In many ways, they know you're there, but they're looking at him. So it's
Yes.
being seen, and I know Manulife John Hancock because again, as a journalist, I've been following the financial services industry for now going on 4 decades. And you, based on what I know of your journey, you came in at the kind of the nascent stage of what is now really a cutting edge area. And that's what attracted me as a financial journalist, is this idea of financial behaviors in journalism, or that people didn't pay attention to the behavioral and emotional side of decision making when it comes to finances, because it was all about nuts and bolts and logic and returns, and this is all numbers, and it's very simple, and you put in a formula and this is the way it comes out, and that's how you know what to do. And now we've seen this evolution that at least I can say I personally witnessed, where the financial services industry, and you talked about your company having an early idea that they weren't executing on yet, but it was the foundation of this idea that understanding the emotional challenges, the emotional weights, especially during periods of transition. You're emotional when your relationship is falling apart. You're emotional when, and sometimes it's positive emotion. You're emotional when your kids is going to college, but you haven't figured out how you're going to pay for it. You're emotional when a loved one passes away, and your ability or a financial professional's ability to really be of service is not only about seeing and listening, but engaging, acknowledging the emotional weight of transition and taking that into account as they manage and help and empower their clients. What has been your observations? You already kind of, in some ways, foreshadowed it, about the finances interaction with the emotions of these moments of change and how that informs how you try to educate professionals to be able to be effective.
Yeah, it's a really great question because if you think about it, all of these life transitions have huge financial impacts.
Yes.
Huge. And so many of us do not spend any time planning and doing the work to plan for these types of transitions, which typically most or all of them will happen to all of us at some point in our lives.
Yes.
I mean, there's an old adage that people spend, more time planning their 2-week vacation than they do their retirement, which might be 20 or 30 years, right? So I think it's really critical that we take a step back, we think about what these transitions could be in our lives, and start to work with someone, start to work with a financial advisor who's empathetic, who listens, who has a planning practice where they're working to help people with financial planning, and think through how you'll handle these transitions. Not just the money side, but the emotional side. And the more that you've planned, the easier it's going to be when that transition happens. If you've got a plan in place and that plan is funded, so you don't have to worry about the financial aspect of it, then you can focus on the emotional and the practical. So whether that's dealing with grieving or that's dealing with literally taking care of an aging parent, if you've got the finances in place, you have a plan, you're not surprised, then you can focus on the other aspects of it. And I think that's really important. And I will tell you that all of the financial research shows that women, are not overly confident in the financial arena, even though they tend to score higher. If you force them to make a decision and make a choice, they tend to score higher than men do. But they're not confident in their skills. So the more we can do to build up their confidence, to build up their knowledge, the easier these life transitions are going to be to navigate when they get to them.
One of the biggest challenges that I had to personally navigate, again, as someone who was raised by a mother who had no understanding at all. She had a high school education when I was born. She got some college credits, but it wasn't like someone was reading the Wall Street Journal and discussing stocks and bonds and mutual funds. And so even as someone who was obviously better educated and became a financial and business journalist, there was still this, you said about the confidence of being able to lean into this space in a way. And then for me, it was also about understanding that life doesn't become less predictable because you plan. It doesn't. It's still going to be unpredictable. Yeah. But it's a lot easier to adjust and change an existing planning crisis than it is to start the planning crisis.
Absolutely.
And I always try to not make it all about crisis. I remember I had already had 2 children by this time when I found out that it'll cost you close to, or it's probably more than that now, over $250,000 just to raise a child from birth to age 18, not counting college. And how much more thought would I put into planning with the good news of a baby's on the way if I thought of it as more just an emotional event and more, okay, we need to plan for this financially. And of course, with my younger children, I did more of that with our financial experts. But talk about this idea of creating, you touched on it, the importance of creating a sense of confidence, especially in times of uncertainty. And even when we think times are certain, life is never totally certain. And how important it is for the financial advisor to help cultivate a degree of confidence for people who are not usually experiencing that when they talk about financial planning.
Well, it's interesting. I have this old adage that I say all the time: whether you have a plan or you don't have a plan, there's going to be a plan made. And a lot of times it's really about who ends up making that plan. So one of the examples I'm going to use is, caring for aging parents, or your own longevity plans and how you want to live as you age. And it is a huge, huge area of planning. I will tell you, if you have a financial plan today and it does not include longevity plans and how you're going to plan for that phase of life and what it is you want, that financial plan will most likely fall apart, because the expenses associated with that last journey in our lives are astronomical, absolutely astronomical. And, I was doing a lot of work on aging and longevity when we went through this with my husband's parents. Mine had passed earlier and relatively quickly, but his had some long, drawn out illnesses. And I will tell you that it ripped his family apart, absolutely ripped his family apart. And I was sitting on the sidelines, I'm the in-law, so I don't have much input. I was like, I think I might be able to help, but nobody was listening to me. But everything from, every mistake in the book was made. And the huge heartbreak about this is that his family is still estranged today because of things that happened during that period. And so, when I talk to people about like their own longevity, I say, look, either way, there's going to be a plan. If you want to be in control of your life, be proactive, make the plan. And by the way, help your kids, right?
Yes.
Don't
Yeah.
put them in the position of having to make all of these decisions and trying to second guess themselves. And is this what mom would have wanted? Or is this what dad would have wanted? Make the plan, communicate it, have conversations with your family, and be transparent about it. It's so critically important. Because just assuming, as an example, that your kids will take care of you, wow. Yeah,
Right.
that's a tough one.
That's very
I mean,
tough.
that's a real tough one, right? Do they live there? Are they available? Are they working? Are they raising their own family? Are there funds? Is there money? There's so many questions.
Yes.
So I think that the more that people think about these issues, and granted, it's not fun. It's not fun to think about getting old, but it beats the alternative. I mean, let's face it, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is not getting
Absolutely.
old. So I think that the more time that we all put into this and planning for those different phases of life, um, the better chance we have of living the kind of life we want to during those years.
So much of this, and I've had this conversation both with people in the financial space and everybody in my audience knows I'm passionate about health and longevity in the health space, is reframing the conversation. For my mother and previous generations, talking about things like insurance was treated as death planning. Like, and of course, nobody wants to talk about it if you're going to put it in that context. And the thing that had to happen in my own head in terms of how I look at it, how I talk to my peers, and how I'm trying to, and I'm still getting there, by the way. It's not like I'm already there, but trying to be more forward facing and say, no, this is about life planning. And what I started asking myself, I'm 65 now, and it's like, no, it's not planning. It's about what happens if you live.
Right.
You're planning, yes, you could pass and say, oh, well, good luck. But I'm at the stage where I could live another 3 decades. I could live another 4 decades. What do I want that to look like if I'm here? Whether everything goes perfectly, which nothing ever does. It's something in between where I have some moments of needing help and disability. And then what happens, of course, if the obvious happens, I pass away sooner than I plan to. But either way, it's easier on me and everyone concerned if there's a plan. But reframing it as, no, I'm not planning for death. I'm planning for my life. This is life planning.
Exactly.
My life, the life of my children. I have a grandson, the life of my grandchildren. And once I made that turn and that reframing, all of a sudden it didn't seem as heavy and painful and difficult. How much of that is part of the I'm going to put it in two ways. You're speaking to the planners, or you're training and educating the planners. How much your
Yep.
work is about helping them to understand that depending on who they're talking to and the emotions they're bringing to the table, the reframing of what's available is almost more important than what's available.
Okay. So I will say that women financial advisors tend to be a bit better at this in general. And it's a generalization, right? And just a bit more empathetic and better listeners and more focused on the planning. That's the research has shown that. We have been talking in this industry for a very long time about these things. I will say that today, women, even though women in the US are over 50% of the population, they're only 18% of the financial advisors. And when you look at the Black community is just under 14% of the population. Women in the Black community are 7.88% of that population and only 2.9% of financial advisors. So I will say that, listen, like with anything, like when you're getting a new doctor, you often have to interview multiple people to find someone that you're comfortable with, who you believe is hearing you, who's listening and hearing what you're saying, who is focused on the things that you want to focus on, not just the investments and not just the returns on those investments and how they're expected to operate in different markets. That's important, not discounting that. But the planning is so much more critical, right? All financial advisors do the first piece. It's the ones who do the other piece that really are the ones that I would want to talk to. And that I think a lot of women really want that type of planning in their lives, and hopefully men as well. I will say that the percentage of people who have a comprehensive financial plan is growing. We're now at almost 60% of those who work with advisors do have a financial plan. That's incredible. That's come
Yeah.
a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And then there's the people not working with financial advisors, right? So how do we help them? How do we get to them? How do we get them resources so that they can think through all these things and live a better life?
You talk about the numbers and the levels of representation, women, Black people, and I say this, it's not an either or. You need more representation, but until that representation is achieved, again, what you do is so critical. I'm so glad I got you on the show. The education of the existing professionals, you know, uh, we can't wait until there's parity between men and women before there's the right services for women,
Yes.
which means there has to be a cross appreciation of training, regardless of your background, of being able to serve people from not from your background. And in my case, I'm going to take this out of the financial space. My therapist is a white male therapist. He's a white male therapist who leans into, I need to understand the way you think based on who you are and where you're from, because I can't help you if I can only see through my own lens. So while as a Black person, yes, there's a part of me that says, yeah, I'd be more comfortable with a Black person. But I also know there are professionals who are not Black. And I'm sure you know there are professionals who are not women, who are men,
Right.
who, because they've leaned into in their education and their training, say, but I still get it. I still know to talk to both people when I'm meeting with a couple and not
Right.
just the guy. Talk to me about the work that you've been able to do and the progress that you've seen. And I know we both seen tremendous progress over the years in terms of getting that level of education so that if you're a professional, there's a certain amount of competency you should have. So you should be able to talk to anyone. And I'm going to go beyond race and gender. You should be able to talk to someone who maybe didn't come from the same economic background that you came from, or didn't go to the same schools you begin to understand that you tailor your service to the person as opposed to trying to kind of force fit the person into the services, which I think 50 years ago, that's what it was like. Either this is for you or this is not. And if it's not, you don't belong. We don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, being in this business almost 40 years, we've seen it evolve a lot. We've seen the type of investment planning evolve a great deal from, the old days of the stockbrokers where they were dialing for dollars and selling stocks to now, comprehensive investment management and really looking at your full investment picture. We've seen the same thing happen with financial planning. And you're right, there's a lot of great men advisors who've done the work, who've gotten the professional designations in planning, who do an amazing job for their clients. And I think we all have to be open to talking to people that are different from us. I wasn't raised by a single mother, but my family did suffer a lot of financial reverses when I was very young. And so we were poor. I was lucky enough that I knew that college was important to me from a very young age. When I was 7 years old, I knew about financial aid. I don't know why, but I knew about financial aid and I knew that one way or another I was going to go to college. And, some of that was my parents. I don't know how I figured that out, but I think it's important that all of us stay open to everyone. We're very passionate about financial inclusivity at Manulife John Hancock. I think all of us in the industry are trying to pull in more diverse people to work in the industry. It can be a great career. It can be a rewarding career. In so many different ways, financially, but also to your point, living to your values. So I think that you do have to oftentimes interview a few people before you find that person you're comfortable with. I would encourage people to look for credentials, look for things like a CFP, a certified financial planner, talk to people about their philosophy. But also make sure they're asking you questions, right? And that they're listening to you and hearing you. Because sometimes you get in front of people and they're just talking at you, right? If they're not asking you questions and they're not drawing you out, they're probably not going to be the right fit for you.
Well, I agree across the board. The best service providers, if you across the board, are great listeners. So that by the time they talk, they are really talking to you and your needs and your values and your goals. And guys, speaking of the credentials, this woman's got more letters passed after her name than a little bit, because I believe in credentials, and I think that's important. It's not a substitute for everything else we're talking about, but it is very important to find people who really do have the training and the education to really be of service and to help you to achieve your goals. I do want you to talk more because I think it's a really an exceptional program. Obviously, it's won awards. Talk about the Women, Wealth, and Wisdom campaign, and and why it's as effective as it's been, especially when you consider, as you said, where you found that kind of thinking when you started, it was rudimentary as the beginning of a good idea, but it wasn't well executed. And now you come to the point of having women, wealth, and wisdom being seen as one of the kind of the standard bearers of best practices for financial services.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. It was really honing in on the case studies. And so we had the case studies focus on life transitions. We had first time home buyer. Now, that may happen at a young age, but that may happen after a divorce. You don't know when that's going to happen in life, or after the death of a spouse. We have new parent, I'm not a parent myself, but obviously I've seen all of my friends and family go through that process. And there's so much involved in that. And to your point, understanding the financial implications of that early and trying to start some of those savings accounts early, even with small amounts of money, can make all the difference in the world. I may not be a mother, but I'm a really good aunt. And so I always make everybody set up 529 plans, and that's what they get. Other than those first initial gifts, I learned a long time ago, the kids don't remember the toy you gave them, but when they're 18 and they see the amount in an account, they're going to be grateful, right? We have a case study on women business owners, which is really, really important. I mean, women are opening almost 50% of the businesses in this country. And right now, women own 39% of the businesses in this country. And by the way, Black women are the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs. It's amazing.
Yes.
But at the same time, very few of them are accessing bank loans for funding, and they're getting less than 1% of venture capital money. So lots of opportunity there. We've got a case study on, widowhood, which is a shocking thing for most people. A lot of people don't know that the average age of widows in the United States is 59 years old.
Wow, I didn't
It's
know that.
very young.
I would have
Yeah.
guessed a
So
lot older than that.
yeah.
Wow.
And it catches a lot of people off guard and a lot of people by surprise, and they are not financially prepared for it in so many cases. We do have a case study on divorce. We focused our case study on divorce for planning after you're divorced. There are some professional designations that some advisors have where they've studied how to help people through the divorce itself. So we focus kind of on that time after divorce and how to get your financial affairs in order and do all the things that you're now going to have to be responsible for on your own as a single person. We've got one on estate planning, critical topic. And it's not just something you do when you retire. Especially if you're a parent, you need to do estate planning from a pretty young age to make sure your family is taken care of should anything happen. We've got one on strategic philanthropy. And we also have a longevity case study. It focuses on caring for aging parents, but you can apply all the same principles to your own longevity planning. So that's where we are today. We believe we can continue to grow on these topics over time. But we dig in, we tell a story about someone, and then we dig into all of the different planning considerations that they may want to think through as they're facing this particular transition. And then each case study has a very robust worksheet or checklist. As an example, the one that goes with caring for aging parents is 9 pages long, right? So it takes you through all of the different things that you want to be thinking of when you're making longevity plans, and that plan for your life, as you like to say, which I love, planning for your life, not your death, your life. So we've got, videos for all of the case studies. We've got these worksheets and checklists, and lots of tools to start to help you. And then of course you can work with a financial advisor on these things, but you can also work through them on your own.
Yes.
So if you don't have a financial advisor, you're not comfortable working with one right now, then at least there's some education there, some tools, some worksheets, some checklists to help you get started.
See, I mean, I think that's beautiful because there's people that want to do everything on their own. There's people that want to do everything with an advisor, but they have the flexibility to do what you feel comfortable doing on your own, but get help for the areas that you don't feel as comfortable or prepared for. Having that flexibility really does allow you to tailor the resources to your own situation. And my belief is that you really can't effectively serve people unless you can serve them in a way that's unique to their situation, because each person's situations are unique. I know for me personally that, again, the longevity planning and the estate planning is the things that I struggle with the most. I have all my adult life, but it now is more critical than ever because, I've had to accept it's not a one-time deal. Like with every life transition, again, I've been married more than once. And there's a reset that has to happen. I think you kind of touched on that after a divorce. It is not always like, oh, I'm devastated and I got to get undevastated. It's more all the moving pieces have changed. Your relationship to your spouse or former spouse has changed. Your kids are older. There may be blended family issues you got to take into account. And so, even if nothing, the quote unquote nothing goes wrong, I get married when I'm 25, we never divorce, my kids are fine, I have a great career, I never get laid off. You know, even if nothing goes wrong, things change because time goes by. The way you plan when you have
Absolutely.
school age kids is not how you plan when you have two adult children, one married, one not, and one of them has a family and one doesn't. And if it's life planning, as long as life goes on, planning goes on. And I found that the first thing we do when we don't want to plan is we don't plan. The second thing we do is we do it once and we try to set it and forget it and walk away. And I did that, but we're not done.
Well, and it's interesting because you have to be really careful with estate planning. I mean, the guidance is that you should review your estate plan every 3 to 5 years, or if there's a major change in your life, like a
Mm-hmm.
divorce, like a death,
Right.
or if you move to another state, because the laws in every state are different.
Yes.
I mean, we moved from Connecticut to Tennessee, we had to redo our estate plans. The other thing that happens
And
is,
just to interject, and we're more mobile these last two generations
right.
than our parents ever were. I mean, my mother lived in two places her whole life, and that's not the way we're much more mobile than we used to be. And I didn't think about that. About you move to another state, you better
You
check.
have to redo your plans.
Right.
You absolutely do. And then I also want you to think about the people that, there's estate roles and people that we name to carry those important estate roles for us. The executors, the trustees, the power of attorney, the medical power of attorney, the guardians for your children. You name people and then things change with those people. And sometimes you need to adjust who you've named, or you get divorced and maybe you have some of your in your case, maybe some of your ex-wife's family was named as those people, and you might not any longer want them to play those roles in your estate plan. So, you have to look at it. All financial planning, all wealth management planning is a living, breathing thing. It's not something you do and set it and forget it. You should be constantly reviewing, checking, does this still meet and serve the needs that I have and the goals that I have for my life
Yeah. And again,
and my family.
financial planning again is life planning. It really
Right.
is life planning. And if you look at it that
Absolutely.
way, then you'll just see this as a necessary part of your life unfolding. Um, when you look at platforms like Women, Wealth, and Wisdom, and you're doing this work, what kind of patterns do you see in terms of how people approach financial planning during these difficult life path transitions that our audience can kind of anticipate, maybe learn from? What are the most common things that you see?
I think the patterns are just what you alluded to, is that
Mm,
people are not doing the planning, they're avoiding it. When you talk to financial advisors, they'll tell you stories about clients that they have been on for 10 years trying to get them to do their estate plans. And they've introduced them to estate attorneys and they talk to them every time they have a meeting and they say, this is so important, we need to do it. And the client's not moving. And, at some point, people have to take responsibility for this for their own lives. But that's probably the biggest challenge that I think exists in the industry, is that people are reluctant many times to do this planning. And I go back to that adage, whether you have a plan or you don't have a plan, there's going to be a plan made. It might not be the one you want. So it really serves all of us to embrace this and to do this. So that's probably the biggest pattern that we see. I will say too that with women, and I see a lot and have seen. I'm a baby boomer as well, so we've probably seen more of this than maybe younger generations have. But I've seen a lot of women give up their power. So, listen, raising children, I believe, is the most important job in the world. But I always encouraged my friends, don't give up your power. Stay
mm,
involved in your finances, even if you're a stay-at-home parent. And that could go on either side, because we see a lot of stay-at-home dads these days as well. Stay involved in the finances. I know it's another thing to do. I get it when you have so many things to do, but you've got to stay involved in the finances. Um, the other thing that I think is really important is, if you have any kind of professional credentials, keep them up to date. If you have a nursing license, do your continuing education and keep your nursing license, because you never know what curves life is going to throw you. And the more that you've kept those things up to date, the more that you can kept in touch with a professional network, at least at a minimum level, right? Maybe once a quarter, you try to have a networking lunch, if you can get a babysitter and get away, but try to keep those things up to date, because if life throws you a curveball and you need to go back to work, the more that you've done that, the easier it's going to be for you to make that transition. So I always say to people, don't give up your power.
One of my more recent guests on this show, her name is Elizabeth White, and she's an author of an amazing book called 55 Underemployed and Faking It. And it was this whole idea, especially for women, like, yeah, not just for women, that statistically the odds of you outliving your partner is high.
Um,
The odds of you reaching the end of your career and your income either being disappeared or declining, because ageism is a real thing.
it is a real thing.
And but the life that you thought you wanted, again without planning, will suddenly be planned for you. Like, you weren't planning to downsize, but guess what? You're going to downsize. You weren't planning to move, but guess what? You're going to move. You weren't planning to, there's a whole bunch and so the whole book is about navigating, again, this second half of life. Used to be the last quarter, now it's a half. That without planning, and part of the planning is what you brought up. You need to be current as you can in whatever profession, because it's hard enough to restart anyway. But if you restart, right, and now you in whether it's no AI skills or whatever, you're trying to play catch up, competing in a very competitive marketplace that has long-term financial implications. So again, financial planning is more than life planning. And like I said, if you don't do it, it'll be planned for you. Decisions will be forced upon you.
And then you become more of a victim. And I don't think any of us want to be victims. And, you see this a lot in divorce and in early widowhood, or, having a spouse pass away early. That loss of that income is huge. And if you haven't been involved in your finances and you don't know what's going on and you haven't kept up any sort of professional network or any kind of credentials, and you're starting from scratch, I mean, you can see a drastic difference in your life and in your lifestyle and what you can afford. And that's unfortunate, because if you just did a little bit of planning, and believe me, I see how challenging it is raising a family. And as I said, I think it's the most important job in the world. But even just carving out a little bit of time for yourself to make sure you're up to date on the family's finances, to have a networking lunch once a quarter, to keep a license or a designation up to date, and do that continuing education, it also keeps your brain engaged. And I think people love that as well, that piece of it, but it can make all the difference in the world. And, as you said, we never know what life is going to throw us.
I want to kind of get back to this idea of execution. I'm an ideas person as a journalist.
Okay.
I have great ideas, and then I have to get myself to actually execute on one of them. And then there are some people who are really naturally great at execution. And this goes back to the theme of these conversations that we're having in partnership with Manuel like John Hancock, money moves that matter. The biggest source of frustration for my friends, I got a lot of friends who are financial planners, is they'll do a great plan, but they can't get their client to actually pull the trigger. Like, all the planning in the world doesn't matter without execution. And one of my friends says, I end up redoing the plan because by the time they get ready to execute, everything's changed. We almost have to start back from square one.
Right.
What do you experience, and what is it you do with those who come through the educational resources that you're in charge of, about helping financial planners get their clients to execute and to deal with the frustration of, I mean, I'm sure it varies from person to person, from planner to planner, but that getting over the hump of actually doing it. Doctors have the same complaint. We give them a plan, we tell them what they need to do, and then they come back and did you do it? No, doc, I know I said I would do it, but I kind of didn't do it.
Well, I think I don't have a silver bullet, and I don't have an answer for that, because we see it all the time as well. And I think that's where personal responsibility comes into it. And I think the more that we can educate people, the more it helps move them along. The other thing that I think really happens is if you share personal stories. I've told a lot of people about what happened with my husband's family. I mean, it was heartbreaking. And I've told that story so many times over the years. And it has inspired some of my friends to actually move on some of these plans. And I'm a little bit of an evangelist on it because I will say this all the time. I'm like, look, you don't want your kids to go through the same things you went through with your parents. I was just talking to a friend Saturday night about this, and her mother is at end of life. She's in hospice. It's a very difficult time. She has dementia, and the cost, she's already in a facility, but now they have to bring in 24-hour care in addition to the care in the facility. And they don't have many months of money here for this. And the stress is adding up. And I turned to her and I said, I'm going to tell you this. Anything you need, I'm here to help you. But start thinking about yourself and start thinking about your kids and how the fact that you don't want them to be in that situation, because now's the time. If you're going to get some insurance, you're going to get some funding for that. You don't want to wait because you're already 62 years old. Right. So, I think telling personal stories helps move people. The financial press is enormously helpful. So thank you for that. Right. Right. So anybody, who's out there talking about it, but at the end of the day, it's really personal responsibility. And there's not much we can do about it except to keep, beating the drum.
Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, that's where our why we're here together having this conversation. As a financial journalist, I talk to people in your profession all the time, and also I talk to obviously our audience or the people who need the service that you provide. And of course, I'm always leaning into my own personal experiences because it really boils down to you got to find your why. Maybe you don't care about what your net worth is. Maybe that's something that but do you care about the experience that your children are going to have? That's what's getting to me. I'm like, what do I want the experience of my children to be when I pass? It's one thing to be sad because I passed. It's another thing to be, I just really wrecked a couple of generations of planning for their lives. And so that's been my why. Like my why has to be that. And a big part of successful financial planners is to try to find the client's why and tie the action to that why. Because some of the things that you think would be obvious, you don't want to lose your home, do you? Well, I don't want to lose my home, but it's not scaring me enough to make me to do something,
Well,
not that you want to scare them, but you want to motivate them.
Yeah, one of the really scary things that I talk about a lot is just the breakup of families and family relationships. And it is incredibly common for that to happen over the estate plan and the end of life plans because of disagreements in the family. And, so I say to people all the time, do you want your children and your grandchildren to remain a cohesive family unit when you and your husband are gone or you and your partner are gone? Well, everybody says, well, yes, of course, I want them to be together as a family.
Yes.
Well, if you want that to happen, then you have to have open, transparent communication about how you've set things up, what your wishes are. You have to listen if they're concerned about any of the plans you've made, right? But work together on it so that you can help avoid that awful family breakup that we see in so many families across this country. And I will tell you that when my husband, the one moment of levity, and there's, sometimes you just have to laugh. But as we were going through this with my husband's family, I was sitting with my brother and sister around a kitchen table and they were like, well, what's the latest? And I was telling them, and my family, my parents had no money. And my brother looked at me and goes, well, who ever thought we would look like the functional ones? And we all started laughing. But, even if it's a small amount of money, families can break up over, grandma's $75 vase that they're fighting over.
Oh, yeah. My family tells me this story all the time of a family that not only broke up, but spent $75,000 fighting over a used lamp.
Yeah.
It was a lamp that you would pay $4 at a yard sale to get.
Right.
But the emotional attachment to, oh, mama said that was mine, but you weren't the one taking care of her, so it really should be mine.
Right. Mama never told me that. She might have told you that, but she didn't tell me. It's crazy, the stuff that goes on. So the more that you can have open conversations with your loved ones about your wishes, about what your plans are, about who you've asked to do different things and why, the better that can be. So I think that may be some people's why, is that I do want my children, my grandchildren, my loved ones to remain a close family when I'm no longer here, holding them together. I want them to be able to hold themselves together. That's all about communication and family communication. And financial advisors can help with that. They can host family meetings. They can bring in the estate attorney to talk about the plan. And I always tell people, you can talk about the plan without talking about the money. You
Yes.
don't have to tell them how much money there is, but you can say, this is the plan, this is how it's divided, this is who's in charge, you know,
Yeah.
without telling them how much money is there. Um, because first of all, it's unknown. We don't know how much money is going to be there when we die anyway. But some people are, especially people of our generation, don't want the kids to know how much money there is.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, I know for the Black enterprise audience, it's this focus on multi generational wealth. And there's been enough generations. I can't say in my family. My family's always been pretty much working class. No huge leaps in wealth from generation to generation. But there are families, many of them covered by Black enterprise, where we've seen one generation have a great success across the family, accumulate a significant amount of wealth that is lost by the next generation, not necessarily because of irresponsibility, but because the generation that built the wealth wouldn't have or didn't have these plans and these conversations and didn't prepare the next generation. It was almost, it sounds like you and I have similar experiences. Me and my siblings, while we had to manage things when our parents passed, it wasn't some great fortune that was going to be lost. Maybe we didn't get ahead, but we weren't going to fall behind. But
Right.
I've seen families that have had, because of the success of their parents, maybe really large successful businesses, or they had great careers, and they did manage the money in real time very well. And I call it, you got all the way to the goal line and then you fumbled. Like you did it really well, and right when you were supposed to score, and in this case, scoring is leaving a legacy to another
Right.
generation to build on, because of not wanting to have these planning conversations around these transitions. You get right to the goal line, and the goal line is I've set up future generations to build on what I've accomplished. So that legacy conversation is a huge motivator in terms of what we know about the Black enterprise audience. And we say, listen, what do you? But it's the same thing you said. What do you want your legacy to be? Do you want it to be
Right.
discord and broken families, or do you want it to be? Someday you want to have your picture hanging over the mantle of the AI generated fireplace by the time this happens. And somebody says, "Yep, that's your great grandpa, Alfred. And if he did what he had to do so we could have all this today." And so that idea of legacy is just a big why that we found out with our audience, which is why we have these kinds of conversations.
And I think it's a really important why. And again, it goes back to communication. It goes back to training and education and teaching values and teaching family values around money. In older generations, in the greatest generation, in baby boomers, especially the older baby boomers, a lot of this was taboo. We didn't talk about money, but it's really important to talk about money, right? And it's really important to talk about values around money. And if you have, even if you've done everything right, and you've got, one of your children who's a spendthrift or perhaps has a substance abuse problem, there's ways to protect them and the money by putting things in trust, right? So there's things that you can do in those situations, but it's all about communication and it's all about values. And I have a friend that I grew up with that I went to high school with, and we were in a very middle class area, a very middle class high school. And I would tell you that she was the richest girl in school, and here's what that meant in 1979. That meant that her parents had the biggest house in the subdivision, which meant it was probably 2,400 square feet instead of 2,200.
Right,
But you know what? Had brick all the way around, not just in the front. So it was really fancy,
right,
right? But it comes to find out they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but their parents chose to raise them like that. Her and her brother shared a car. They didn't each have their own car. They chose to raise them like that. And then they slowly, after 18, once they started college, they started introducing them to the family wealth, the family advisors, teaching them about the business, and it was an evolution. They didn't do it while they were young, but they also didn't give them everything. I mean, none of us had any idea that they were worth that kind of money. And I will tell you that they have all built successful lives, successful careers. They all got educated. They had great kids. Their kids are educated, have great values. Their kids work. Nobody's sitting back waiting for some family wealth to come to them. And it's an enormous amount of wealth. And that's because of the way that her parents raised them and the values they instilled, and the way that when it was time, they started to teach them about the money and introduce them to the advisors and introduce them to the things that they needed to know. And I think however much you have, I mean, they have a lot of money, but however much you have, you can take those same principles and apply them to your family.
as we come down the home stretch, there's just one or two more things I want to talk about. One of the other things that I had to wrestle with, and many of our audience wrestled with, is almost the guilt and shame of not knowing. And in a way, it's like the more educated you are, the more you think, well, I shouldn't have to ask because I have these degrees and I'm successful and I should know. And I tell people, you just talked about it. We need to lean into it because yes, our parents and their parents didn't, but in a way they didn't have to. Meaning all this stuff was institutionalized. Your company worried about it and your government worried about it. And there were no 401ks and there was guaranteed pensions. And what our generation's experienced as the baby boomers is we were in that transition from we got it, we're taking care of it for you, to slowly pushing it more, the 401ks, the 401(b)(3)s. And now we have to be educated and our financial advisors have to be educated because so much of it has been pushed into our hands in a way that wasn't true for previous generations when they just it was more of a paternalistic, both on the public sector and the private sector side of get a good job, keep your nose clean, and at the end of it, after 25
With the gold
years,
watch,
it'll be waiting for you. And for us, it's been more, you need to educate yourself. And of course, we have more tools than they had too. We have the internet, we have resources, but it still put it on us. And as you said, if you're a mother raising a family and trying to take care of a husband, it can be overwhelming for this thing that maybe for your mother and grandmother, it was taken care of. Obviously not perfectly, or we would be where we are now. But now it is on us. And I think some of us are a little intimidated, a little maybe feeling guilty because of what we don't know, what we don't do. But as you said, we have to do it and the resources are available. So we just have to kind of get past that.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes me sad to think that people would have guilt or shame around that because I can guarantee you, I don't know how to do your job, right? I don't know how to do my dentist's job or my doctor's job or, even my roofer's job or my landscaper's job, right? And everybody has their own areas of expertise. So I don't think it's anything to feel guilt or shame about. To your point, there's a lot of resources out there. And there's a lot of amazing financial advisors that can help you with this journey. That's what they do all day. That's what they study all day in order to help us, right? So I think it's just recognizing that we all have our own areas of expertise and we need to go out and search for those people who have the expertise we don't have. There's also a lot of great financial apps out there that can help, budgeting apps, apps that manage your subscriptions and recurring expenses, investing apps. There's all. So if you're millennial, you're Gen Z, and you're more into that way of doing business and that way of doing things, there's a lot of resources out there. There's a ton of education, and that's what we're trying to provide. And at the end of the day, there's great people that you can hire that can help you. And so I think, when you walk into a doctor's office and you hear these stories, if you have any friends who are doctors and they're like, oh God, I hate when people come in and they've done all their research on the internet and they tell me this is what's wrong with them and they want XYZ drug. And I'll start laughing, right? So I can tell you that financial advisors would prefer that you come in and say, I need help, right? I need to understand this. These are my concerns, my fears. These are the things I need to take care of. And I'm looking to someone with the expertise to help us get there. They would prefer that over somebody coming in and saying, I know everything about this and this is what you should do.
Right.
So,
listen, Kathleen, I always wrap up my interviews because I'm passionate about self-care is your capacity to care for everything else you care about. So I always want to talk about what do you do for Kathleen? What do you do for fun? What do you do for self-care? What do you do that makes you want to keep going when you have a bad day or you're going to have a bad day and you face it anyway?
Well, I'm lucky. My husband and I actually, almost 6 years ago, we bought some land in a community in Tennessee. We were living in Connecticut. This is where we wanted to be when we retired and built our home. And it's on a golf course on a lake. So our boat is right here. We have golf carts and the golf course is right out the door. I was not a golfer at the time. I now love it. I'm terrible, but I don't care.
Well, you're not a real golfer if you're not terrible and love it. I'm the same way. I'm horrible at it. I live down the street from a golf course. I'm horrible at it, but who cares?
Yeah, it's so much fun. And for me, it's social. And there was one day in the spring when it was 35-mile-an-hour winds and I was golfing with some friends and I hit a particularly bad shot. And I said, you know what I love about golf? And they all started laughing. They go, well, it couldn't have been that shot. And I said, no, I love that. I'm out here with all of you having a great time. Otherwise, I'd probably be sitting on my couch watching Netflix or reading a book. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it gets you outside. So I love golfing. We have a boat. There's a lot of social things going on here. I'm in a book club. I've been in a book club for 25 years. It's one of my favorite things to do is to be in a book club. And yes, we do really talk about the book. So I have a lot of different things going on. My husband and I love to travel, hiking. I do my best to work out. It's always a work in progress. So,
well, listen, if you're golfing and you're boating and you're hiking, sounds like a lot of working out. I'm passionate about this idea of, we could do a whole other show, which we won't do, I spend a lot of time thinking about what it means to live a robust life for us baby boomers. And we don't look like what we've lived through. You look great. When you told me you were a baby boomer.
Thank you.
I'm just saying, and people say, why don't, I can't believe, because it's what we do that makes us look the way we do. And so hearing about golfing and hiking and boating, or more importantly, and this is life planning too, thinking about where I want to live and what I want my life to feel like is as much about planning as anything else.
Absolutely.
And it is about, you're working, but you're doing work that's meaningful. But you're living a life that's meaningful, doing the things that you enjoy. And I, this is also me coming out of COVID after that shutdown period. I spent a lot of time thinking about, well, when this is over, what do you want it to look like? What do you want it to feel like? And so that's why I always try to end my conversations with that understanding, because that is the long-term why. When all is said and done, wealth is not the money. Wealth is what you can do with it. Wealth is your time. Wealth is your health. Wealth is your energy. Wealth is your relationships.
Absolutely.
That you're blessed that you want to be someplace with your husband in another state.
Not every day,
but not every day, but most days. So this, when we talk about the why of success, the why of wealth, the money, the careers, the titles, the degrees, those are great ways to keep score, but that's not where the wins come from. So I really, really appreciate everything that you shared. I knew we were going to have a great conversation, Kathleen. Thank you so much for being my guest on Beyond the Hype.
And it's been such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me and for having Manulife John Hancock Investments here. We really appreciate the opportunity and admire everything that you're doing.
Well, that's why we work well together. We, common goals, common values, great partners. Listen, everyone, I did it. I delivered, right? Another great edition of Beyond the Hype. Thank you for joining us. This is Money Moves That Matter. This episode of Beyond the Hype was brought to you by Manulife John Hancock. I want to remind you to subscribe to Black Enterprise on YouTube. You want to follow us across all the social platforms. Of course, you get to see this episode and every episode of Beyond the Hype and all of our shows at blackenterprise.com on demand, and of course on YouTube on demand. Listen, we thank you for being with us. We want you to take care of yourself. Make those money moves that count. Just talk about it and meet about it and plan about it. I'm talking to me and you. Make the move, and we'll all continue to do better going forward. Please, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on Beyond the Hype with Black Enterprise. Check out the video channel on blackenterprise.com to find Beyond the Hype and other shows from Black Enterprise editors, writers, and experts. Be sure to subscribe to Beyond the Hype on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SoundCloud. And if you like the show us love by leaving a 5-star review and spreading the word. This is Alfred Edmond Jr. with Beyond the Hype for Black Enterprise. Thank you for listening. For more than 5 decades, we've had your back. Beyond the Hype and Black Enterprise have everything you need to elevate your excellence.